I should have killed Bastien and Celeste when I had the chance. But let me back up. My name doesn't matter anymore. The authorities think I'm dead, and in many ways, the person I used to be is. What matters is that this year, I pulled off the impossible. I orchestrated the greatest heist in modern history, stealing over €200 million worth of artifacts from the Louvre Museum in Paris. And tonight, as I sit in my Swiss villa overlooking Lake Geneva, watching the news report that my former partners have been sentenced to life in prison, I can finally tell you exactly how I did it. The plan took me 18 months to perfect. 18 months of studying guard rotations, memorizing camera angles, and infiltrating the museum's security systems. The Louvre isn't just any museum, it's a fortress. 24-hour surveillance, motion sensors, pressure plates under every major piece, and guards who've been trained by former French military. Most people would call it impossible to rob. I called it a chess game. My team consisted of 5 people, each handpicked for their specific skills. There was Margot, a former circus performer who could slit through laser grids like smoke. Antoine, an electronics specialist who could hack any system ever built. Celeste, my demolitions expert with fingers steadier than a surgeon's. Bastien, our wheelman, though calling him that undersells it. The man could make a motorcycle dance through Paris traffic like poetry in motion. And finally, there was Remy, my inside man who'd been working museum security for 6 years. The target wasn't the Mona Lisa, that's what amateurs think about. No, we were after something far more valuable and far less protected. The crown jewels of Empress Josephine, Napoleon's wife, were on temporary display in the Denon Wing Special Exhibition Hall. The centerpiece was Josephine's ceremonial crown, embedded with the Regent diamond, one of the most perfect stones ever discovered. But that crown wasn't our only target. We were also taking Mesopotamian golden tablets from the Sully Wing, ancient Egyptian burial masks, and a collection of Renaissance sculptures that most people had never even heard of. The beauty of my plan wasn't just the theft itself, it was the misdirection. While everyone would focus on the missing crown jewels, we'd have already moved 20 other priceless artifacts through a network I'd spent years establishing. By the time they realized the full scope of what we'd taken, we'd be ghosts. The night of the heist was October 15th. I chose that date specifically because it was the anniversary of Napoleon's exile to St. Helena. Poetic justice, you might say. The weather was perfect, light rain to muffle sound and reduce foot traffic around the museum, but not enough to affect our motorcycle escape routes. At exactly 11:47 p.m., Remy disabled the motion sensors in the Denon Wing's East Corridor. He had a 3-minute window before the security system would automatically reset and flag the disruption. That gave Antoine just enough time to access the main security panel and create what he called a ghost loop. The cameras would show empty hallways while we moved freely through the museum. Margot was our entry point. The Louvre's architects never anticipated someone who could scale a 40-foot glass pyramid and rappel down the interior without triggering a single sensor. She moved like liquid shadow, dropping into the main lobby and making her way to the staff entrance near the Richelieu wing. Once inside, she had exactly 7 minutes to reach the electrical room and cut power to the backup security systems in our target areas. Here's where most heists fail, they rely on technology too much. I built redundancy into everything. If the electronics failed, we had manual overrides. If the guards changed their patrol routes, we had 3 alternate paths mapped. If someone got caught, the others could still complete the mission and escape. While Margot was moving through the museum's bowels, Celeste was preparing her specialty. The Louvre's walls are 3 feet thick in some places, built to withstand everything from medieval sieges to Nazi bombing runs. But every fortress has weak points, and I'd found ours. There's a maintenance tunnel that runs beneath the Denon Wing, originally built for Napoleon III's renovations. Celeste placed shaped charges at 3 precise points along that tunnel wall. When detonated in sequence, they'd create a hole just large enough for us to move our prizes through, while making it look like the explosion came from a gas leak in the building's heating system. Antoine's job was the most technically complex. Not only did he have to maintain our ghost loop on the security cameras, but he also needed to hack into the museum's climate control system. You see, many of the most valuable pieces are kept in environmentally controlled cases. Change the temperature or humidity too quickly, and alarms start screaming. Antoine wrote a program that would gradually adjust the climate in our target rooms, making it appear like normal fluctuations while actually preparing the cases for rapid opening. Bastien was positioned outside with 3 motorcycles, 2 BMW S1000Rs and a Ducati Panigale. The BMWs were for speed and reliability. The Ducati was for me, because if you're going to pull off the crime of the century, you might as well do it with style. He had memorized 17 different escape routes through Paris, including back alleys that don't appear on any GPS system and maintenance tunnels under the Seine that only city workers know about. At exactly 12:15 a.m., everything began moving like clockwork. Margot had cut the backup power. Antoine's ghost loop was active. Celeste's charges were armed and ready. Remy had created our window of opportunity by sending the 2 night guards to investigate a suspicious noise in the completely opposite wing of the museum. I entered through Margot's route, rappelling down into the pyramid lobby with a heartbeat so calm you'd think I was going to grab coffee instead of stealing priceless artifacts. The adrenaline comes later. During the planning phase, you feel everything. During execution, you become a machine. The Denon wing at night is like walking through a cathedral of human achievement. Paintings worth more than most countries' GDP hang in perfect silence, lit only by emergency lighting that casts everything in an ethereal red glow. But I wasn't there to admire art. I was there to own it. Josephine's crown sat in a climate-controlled case in the center of the exhibition hall, surrounded by other pieces from Napoleon's court. The case itself was a work of art, bulletproof glass, titanium reinforcement, and a locking mechanism that cost more than most people make in a lifetime. It also weighed nearly 200 pounds when fully assembled. This is where most people would try to crack the case or disable its systems. I took a different approach. Instead of fighting the security, I convinced it to help me. 3 months earlier, I'd hired a company to deliver a replacement case for routine maintenance. That replacement case had identical external specifications but modified internal mechanisms. When Antoine triggered the swap protocol I'd embedded in the museum's inventory system, the cases switched positions automatically. The crown lifted out of its case like it was waiting for me. The Regent diamond caught what little light there was and threw it back in perfect prismatic patterns. For just a moment, I understood why Napoleon had conquered half of Europe. Power like this changes you at a molecular level. But there was no time for philosophy. Celeste's charges would detonate in exactly 4 minutes, and we needed to be clear of the blast zone. I secured the crown in a specially designed case that would protect it from both shock and electromagnetic interference. The other jewelry pieces followed quickly, earrings that had belonged to Marie Antoinette, a necklace commissioned by Louis XIV, and a ceremonial sword that had been lost for over a century. Margot was already moving the Egyptian artifacts through the tunnel system. Those burial masts had been crafted by artisans who believed they were creating vessels for immortal souls. Now they were becoming my retirement fund. The irony wasn't lost on me. The Mesopotamian tablets were the trickiest part. Each one weighed over 50 pounds and contained cuneiform inscriptions that recorded some of humanity's earliest laws. Drop one, and you'd destroy 4,000 years of history. Handle them properly, and they'd fund a very comfortable lifestyle in a country with no extradition treaties. At 12:28 a.m., Celeste's charges detonated. The explosion sounded exactly like a gas leak rupture. I tested the acoustics extensively in abandoned buildings around Paris. Emergency alarms began blaring throughout the museum, but they were triggering containment protocols for a utility emergency, not a theft. The guards would be evacuating visitors and securing fire exits, not looking for missing artifacts. We had exactly 11 minutes before the fire department arrived and began securing the building. That was cutting it close, but precision timing was what separated professionals from amateurs. Through Celeste's newly created exit, we moved €200 million worth of history in under 8 minutes. Bastien was waiting with the motorcycles running. The sound of those engines in the underground parking structure was like mechanical thunder. He'd calculated our routes down to the second, accounting for traffic light timing, police patrol schedules, and even the average speed of late-night pedestrians crossing streets. This is where everything should have gone perfectly. We split into two groups as planned. Margot, Antoine, and Remy took one route with the bulk of our haul. Bastien, Celeste, and I took another route with the crown jewels. The plan was to rendezvous at a warehouse in Montreal where we'd divide everything according to our pre-agreed percentages. I should have seen the signs. Bastien had been asking too many questions about the fence operations. Celeste had been unusually interested in which pieces were most liquid on the black market. But when you're running an operation this complex, you assume your team is as committed to the plan as you are. The ride through Paris was flawless. Bastien navigated us through back streets I didn't even know existed, past sleeping neighborhoods and closed shop fronts, through tunnels that echoed with the roar of our engines. The Ducati handled like it was reading my thoughts, leaning into corners with precision that made the whole experience feel like flying rather than driving. We reached the warehouse at exactly 12:57 a.m. Margot's team was already there, unloading their portion of the haul with the efficiency of a Formula One pit crew. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. That should have been my first warning. In my experience, when everything goes exactly according to plan, someone is planning something you don't know about. The warehouse was an old textile factory I'd purchased through a shell company 6 months earlier. It had multiple exits, no neighbors, and enough space to properly catalog and divide our take. I'd even installed climate control systems to preserve the artifacts during our brief storage period. We spread everything out on tables I'd had custom built for this moment. Under the harsh LED work lights, the stolen treasures looked different than they had in the museum. Less like priceless art and more like very expensive merchandise. Which, I suppose, is exactly what they'd become. Josephine's crown sat in the center of our makeshift showroom like a centerpiece at the world's most exclusive dinner party. The Regent diamond seemed to pulse with its own internal light, throwing tiny rainbows across the concrete walls. Even Margot, who'd seen enough valuable things to be jaded, couldn't stop staring at it. Before I tell you what happened next, if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button. You'll want to remember this channel for what comes next, because this is where everything went sideways. The division was supposed to be simple. Everyone got their agreed upon percentage based on their role and risk level. I, as the mastermind and primary investor, took 40%. The others split the remaining 60% according to their contributions. Margot and Antoine got 15% each. Bastien and Celeste got 12% each. Remy, as our inside man with the least physical risk, got 6%. But when it came time to actually divide the crown jewels, Bastien and Celeste exchanged a look I should have recognized immediately. It was the look of people who decided they deserved more than they were getting. The thing is, Bastien said, his voice casual in the way that people sound when they are about to ruin your entire life, Celeste and I have been thinking. The crown jewels are really the centerpiece of this whole operation. Without them, this is just another museum theft. With them, it's legendary. Celeste nodded, her hand resting on a bag I hadn't noticed her carrying. We figure they are worth at least 60% of the total haul on their own. Maybe more, to the right collector. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not fear, I'd planned for betrayal. Disappointment, maybe. These were people I'd trusted with my life just hours earlier. People I'd made rich beyond their wildest dreams. And they wanted more. The plan stands as agreed, I said quietly. Everyone gets their percentage. No negotiations. That's when Celeste opened her bag and pulled out a pistol. Not a subtle weapon or a compact piece for intimidation. A full-sized SIG SAR that looked like it could punch holes through engine blocks. Actually, she said, we think the plan needs some revisions. Bastien was already moving toward the crown, his movements careful but determined. Nothing personal, you understand. Just business. Here's what they didn't know, I'd been planning for this exact scenario from the moment I'd started recruiting the team. Trust is a luxury that career criminals can't afford, and betrayal is as predictable as sunrise. I'd installed insurance policies that would activate if anyone tried to double-cross me. But I let them think they were winning. Bastien secured the crown and the most valuable jewelry pieces while Celeste kept her gun trained on the rest of us. Margot, Antoine, and Remy looked like they wanted to intervene, but 40 years of combined criminal experience had taught them when to fold. "You're making a mistake," I told them, and I meant it. Not because I was angry, anger is unproductive. But because they were about to discover that stealing from me was considerably more dangerous than stealing from the Louvre. "Maybe," Celeste replied, backing toward the exit with Bastien. "But we'll be making it from a beach in South America with enough money to buy our own small country." They disappeared into the Paris night with approximately 30 million euros worth of Napoleon-era jewelry, including the Regent diamond that had been the crown jewel of our entire operation. The warehouse fell silent except for the hum of the climate control systems and the sound of my remaining team members breathing. Margot was the first to speak. "What now?" "Now," I said, walking over to a laptop I'd kept separate from our main operations, "we proceed with the original plan. You three get your full percentages from what remains. Consider the crown jewels a lesson in why loyalty pays better than greed." What I didn't tell them was that I'd already activated my insurance policy. The crown and jewelry pieces that Bastien and Celeste had stolen weren't just valuable artifacts. They were also tracking devices, GPS transmitters I'd embedded in the custom cases during our preparation phase. Every piece they'd taken was broadcasting its location to a network of contacts I'd cultivated specifically for situations like this. But more than that, I'd done something that would ensure their betrayal destroyed them completely. The crown jewels they'd stolen were perfect replicas I had made months earlier. The real pieces were already safely stored in a location known only to me. Bastien and Celeste had risked everything to steal forgeries worth maybe 50,000 euros to the right prop master. The remaining artifacts were authentic, though. The Egyptian burial masks, Mesopotamian tablets, and Renaissance sculptures were worth approximately 170 million euros to collectors who asked no questions about provenance. After paying my team their percentages, I'd still net over 68 million euros from the operation. Margot, Antoine, and Remy took their money and disappeared according to plan. Margot to Thailand, where she'd purchased a compound near Chiang Mai. Antoine to Costa Rica, where he was building a sustainable technology farm. Remy to New Zealand, where he'd invested in a vineyard that would keep him comfortable until he died of old age. I gave them 48 hours to reach their destinations and establish their new identities. Then I made a phone call to a contact in the French National Police. "Inspector Dubois," I said when he answered. "This is your anonymous tip about the Louvre heist." What followed was a conversation that lasted exactly 7 minutes and provided enough information to track down Bastien and Celeste without implicating anyone else involved in the operation. I gave their names, their likely escape routes, and the location where they'd be trying to fence the stolen jewelry. I also provided one additional piece of information that sealed their fate. The crown jewels they were carrying were stolen property, and they were planning to leave the country through Charles de Gaulle Airport on a flight to Buenos Aires at 6:35 a.m. The beauty of the trap was its simplicity. Bastien and Celeste would attempt to pass through airport security with their priceless, stolen artifacts. When the artifacts were examined and revealed to be high-quality forgeries, they'd be arrested for theft, possession of stolen property, and attempted fraud. The fact that they couldn't explain where they'd gotten perfect replicas of recently stolen crown jewels would only make their situation worse. Meanwhile, I was already in Switzerland, having crossed the border using an identity I'd established years earlier. My villa overlooking Lake Geneva had been purchased through a series of shell companies that made it effectively impossible to trace back to my real identity. The Swiss banking system, despite recent reforms, still offered enough privacy for someone who understood how to navigate it properly. The morning news was better than I dared hope. Bastien and Celeste had been arrested at Charles de Gaulle Airport with replica crown jewels in their possession. The news reports focused on the bumbling thieves who'd somehow managed to steal worthless forgeries from the Louvre, making them look like incompetent amateurs rather than professional criminals. But the real masterpiece was still to come. Because while everyone was focused on the arrest and the discovery of the forgeries, no one was asking the right questions about the rest of the missing artifacts. The Egyptian burial masks, Mesopotamian tablets, and Renaissance sculptures had simply vanished from the investigation. As far as the authorities knew, the crown jewels were the only target, and since they'd recovered evidence of the theft, the case was effectively closed. Inspector Dubois held a press conference 3 days later, announcing that the masterminds behind the Louvre heist had been apprehended and that all stolen artifacts had been accounted for. Bastien and Celeste, facing life sentences, had no incentive to complicate their situation by revealing the existence of accomplices or additional stolen property. The beauty of it was poetic. Their greed had blinded them to the obvious trap, and their betrayal had provided me with the perfect cover to disappear completely. They'd wanted to cut me out of my own operation, and instead, they'd eliminated themselves while providing me with the ideal scapegoats. But even that wasn't the end of my revenge. You see, I'd spent months studying Bastien and Celeste before recruiting them. I knew their weaknesses, their fears, and most importantly, their families. Bastien had a sister in Marseille who was struggling to keep her restaurant open. Celeste had parents in Normandy who were facing foreclosure on their farm. Before their arrest, I'd made anonymous donations that solved these problems. Bastien's sister received a mysteriously generous investment that allowed her to expand her restaurant into the most successful bistro in her neighborhood. Celeste's parents found their mortgage mysteriously paid off by a clerical error at their bank that worked heavily in their favor. I wanted them to spend their prison sentences knowing that while they rotted in cells, their betrayal had inadvertently provided their loved ones with the financial security they'd always wanted. Every family dinner they missed, every birthday celebration they couldn't attend, would be funded by the money they'd tried to steal from me. That was 3 years ago. Today, I live in a world-class museum of my own creation. My Swiss villa houses some of the most precious artifacts in human history, displayed in a private gallery that only I will ever see. The Egyptian burial masks sit in climate-controlled cases in my study, where I can contemplate the craftsmanship of artisans who died 4,000 years ago. The Mesopotamian tablets rest in my library, their cuneiform inscriptions telling stories of law and justice that seem almost prophetic given recent events. The Renaissance sculptures have been placed throughout the villa's gardens, where they are illuminated by carefully positioned lighting that makes them seem to glow against the Swiss mountains. Every morning, I drink my coffee while looking at art that museums around the world would kill to possess. But the real crown jewels, the authentic pieces that Bastien and Celeste died thinking they'd stolen, sit in a vault built into the villa's foundation. Josephine's actual crown rests on a pedestal surrounded by security systems that make the Louvre look like a corner convenience store. The Regent diamond catches the light from strategically placed LEDs, throwing patterns across the vault walls that never get old. I could live 10 lifetimes and never spend all the money from selling just half of what I took. But money was never really the point. The point was proving that impossible things are only impossible until someone with sufficient planning and patience decides to make them possible. The French authorities still consider the Louvre case closed. Bastien and Celeste are serving life sentences in Fresnes prison, where they'll have plenty of time to contemplate the mathematics of betrayal. Margot is running a diving school in Thailand. Antoine is pioneering sustainable energy solutions in Costa Rica. Rennie is making wine in New Zealand that apparently wins international awards. And me? Officially, I don't exist anymore. The identity I used to plan and execute the heist died in a car accident in Monaco 2 years ago, complete with burned remains and dental records that convinced even the insurance investigators. The man writing this story is someone entirely different, with a passport from a country that asks very few questions and banking relationships that value discretion above all else. Every few months, I receive coded messages from my former team members. They are living well, enjoying their retirements, and most importantly, they are keeping their mouths shut. Professional criminals understand that the success of one operation funds the possibility of future operations, and loyalty pays compound interest over time. Sometimes I wonder what Bastien and Celeste think about during their long prison nights. Did they realize that their betrayal was anticipated from the beginning? Did they understand that they were never actually stealing from me, but rather walking into a trap I'd spent months preparing? Did they know that their families are living better lives because of money that was always intended for them, just not in the way they'd planned? I hope they do. I hope they understand that in trying to outsmart me, they actually played their roles perfectly in a much larger game. Their greed served my purposes better than their loyalty ever could have. But mostly, I hope they understand that stealing from the Louvre was never really about the money or even the art. It was about proving that with enough planning, patience, and understanding of human nature, you can rewrite the rules of reality itself. You can walk into one of the most secure buildings in the world, take whatever you want, and disappear so completely that you become a ghost story told by security professionals who still can't figure out how it was done. The Louvre has upgraded their security systems 3 times since our visit. They've hired new consultants, installed additional cameras, and implemented protocols specifically designed to prevent exactly the type of operation we executed. But they are fighting the last war, trying to secure against a crime that's already been perfectly committed. Besides, I'm retired now. The villa, the art, the Swiss bank accounts, they are more than enough for several lifetimes of luxury. I spend my days reading, learning languages, and studying the artifacts I've acquired. Not because I need to understand their monetary value, but because I want to appreciate their cultural significance. There's something satisfying about being the sole custodian of objects that represent the absolute pinnacle of human artistic achievement. In the evenings, I sometimes stand on my terrace and look out over Lake Geneva toward France. Somewhere beyond those mountains, tourists are visiting the Louvre, taking selfies in front of empty display cases that once held the treasures now sitting in my private collection. They are seeing replicas and placeholders, never knowing that the authentic pieces are watching Swiss sunsets from a villa that most people will never even know exists. That's the real art of the perfect crime, not just taking what you want, but making everyone believe that what you've taken was never really there in the first place. The authorities recovered stolen artifacts and arrested the masterminds, so as far as they are concerned, justice was served. The insurance companies paid out claims for pieces they believe were stolen and recovered, so their books are balanced. Even the museum visitors are happy, because they are still seeing Josephine's crown on display, never suspecting that they are looking at a reproduction. Everyone gets to feel satisfied with the outcome, except for 2 people currently serving life sentences for stealing forgeries. And really, when you think about it, that's exactly what they deserve for betraying the person who'd already made them rich beyond their wildest dreams. If this story has taught you anything, let it be this: loyalty is the most valuable currency in any criminal enterprise, and betrayal always costs more than you think you're going to gain. Bastien and Celeste learned that lesson the hard way, but they learned it thoroughly. As for me, I'm living proof that with enough preparation, patience, and understanding of human psychology, you can commit the perfect crime and spend the rest of your life enjoying the rewards. The key is understanding that the perfect crime isn't just about avoiding capture, it's about making capture impossible by ensuring that no one even realizes a crime has been committed. So here I sit, 3 years later, in a Swiss villa filled with priceless stolen artifacts, telling you exactly how I pulled off the greatest heist in modern history. And you know what the beautiful part is? Even if you reported this story to every police agency in the world, they couldn't touch me. Because officially, the Louvre case is closed, the stolen artifacts were recovered, and the criminals responsible are already in prison. Sometimes the perfect crime is hiding in plain sight, disguised as someone else's failure. If this story resonated with you, if it kept you on the edge of your seat wondering how it would all play out, then subscribe for more true stories that will challenge everything you think you know about crime, justice, and the thin line between genius and madness. Because believe me, the Louvre heist was just the beginning of what's possible when you understand that reality is far more flexible than most people realize. And who knows? Maybe next time I'll tell you about the job that made the Louvre look like practice. But that's a story for another day, when I'm feeling nostalgic about the old days and ready to share another impossible truth about what happens when you refuse to accept the word impossible. Until then, remember, the most dangerous criminals aren't the ones who break the rules. They are the ones who understand the rules so well that they can make breaking them look like following them perfectly. Sweet dreams from Switzerland.